Welcome everybody to Carolina Urissa Presents Educating the Next Generation of Spatial Thinkers, a conversation with Dr. Joseph Kerski. And this is the second webinar in our series on GIS education. Our first series featured Dr. Lisa DeChano-Cook and Dr. Adam Matthews presenting K through 12 experiential learning and about landscapes using geospatial STEM tools. And I will drop a link into the chat so you all can check that out. That was a fantastic program that they presented. So I'm going to give a little introduction about this webinar series on education, and then Meredith is going to introduce our fabulous speaker today. And then we'll turn it over to Dr. Kerski. So when I was growing up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I cannot count how many times I interacted with professional biologists when I was in school and in Boy Scouts. I regularly met with DNR biologists doing work on lamprey eradication in the Great Lakes or wetland preservation. And I had a fairly solid foundation of what biology is when I graduated. And I think most people could come up with a definition of biology that's at least in the ballpark. So geography and GIS, it's not quite like that. And that's what we're here to change. So it may surprise you to learn that the greatest philosopher of all time, Immanuel Kant, taught geography throughout his entire career, 40 years of geography lectures from Kant, where, without going too much into metaphysics and epistemology, Kant defined geography as a synthetic discipline. So a synthetic truth is something that adds to another piece of knowledge. So a statement like the sun is 93 million miles from Earth is synthetic because the concept of location, distance, space is not contained in the concept of a sun. So this synthetic nature of geography creates some educational challenges, but it also creates opportunities for geographers and GIS professionals. So where does GIS fit in educational curriculums? Biologists visit biology classrooms. So where do GIS professionals go to when we want to visit school? So we're here to address some of those issues today and to find some ways and some resources to overcome some of those challenges. We also often vent to each other as GIS professionals about the what do you do conversations that we have. What is GIS? And many people end up saying, well, I make maps. But of course, that's only the surface of what we do and the importance of what we do. So if we're going to be trusted by society, if we're going to be, then we have to trust society can understand the importance of why we do what we do and what we do. So as professionals, we have a duty to community outreach and to educate the community, and most importantly, the next generation. So that maybe in 10 years, it will be normal for young people to aspire to become geographers and GIS professionals, or just spatially literate people who bring space into their own subject matter. But we have jobs to do, right? And we have limited time, and we have limited resources as professionals. So I think that we're here today to really help us find the resources that we need to educate the next generation. And I'd also like to challenge you as professionals in our GIS geography field to take those conversations seriously. When people ask you what you do and what GIS is, give them a genuine, honest, and full answer about what GIS is and why you do what you do. I think you'd be surprised how much people are interested if we respect them enough to really give them real answers about what it is that we do. So this case series came as a result of discussions about the state of our profession, and I'm thrilled that so many people have been interested in it. So I'm going to turn it over to Meredith, who is going to introduce our speaker today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Today we're going to hear from Dr. Joseph Kerski, geographer and education manager at Esri. He's focused his career on GIS education and himself holds 3 degrees in geography, a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. As a professional, Dr. Kerski works to expand his use of spatial thinking in all sectors of society by fostering educational partnerships, conducting research, and contributing to the field of GIS through written media. He's an accomplished author, having written 8 books, written and co-authored 8 books, 25 additional chapters, over 1,000 blog essays, 75 articles, and many of the emails that you might see on state listservs such as NCGIS. Each year, he teaches about 40 workshops and presents at 20 national or international conferences. And we're so very fortunate to have him here today with his busy schedule and to have his time and attention. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kerski.
Well, thanks, Dr. Meredith. Thank you, Kevin. And greetings all. Joseph Kerski here. I'd love to chat with you in the future also about this important topic, educating the next generation of spatial thinkers. That's a tall order and only 3 hours of workshop to do it. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have that long. Just want to make sure you folks are on your toes. But I'd like to focus on why to do it and then how to do it. First of all, let's consider the following. I want to find out where you folks are, state, local government, nonprofit. So if you could fill out this poll, that would be wonderful. What sector do you work for? And then what aspect of education are you most interested in working with? That will help guide me in the conversation that we have today. We're only going to give you a short time to fill that out. But as you do that, I'd just like to mention, without boring you to tears, but I've been really blessed to be in 4 different sectors of society in my career. Nonprofit, so working with the National Council for Geographic Education, AAG, and others over the years. Government agencies, so I served at USGS, NOAA, the Census Bureau as geographer and cartographer. I'm in private industry now, as Meredith mentioned. I'm at Esri on the education team. So we are completely focused, the education team, in helping you be successful, you being the education community, be successful with geospatial technology. Our focus is primary, secondary, community, technical, tribal colleges, libraries, museums, and universities, lifelong learning. So that is our focus of our team. We've been around since 1992. I wasn't on the team for that long, but for 16 years now, I've been on that team. And so please give us, your challenges, your feedback, your successes. That's what we're here for. And also, I've been involved with academia. So K through 12 teacher professional development over the years. And I also, like many of you, love teaching. So I've taught at the University of Minnesota, the University of Denver. I'm teaching at Harrisburg Community Colleges. I love community colleges as well. So I'm teaching there right now and elsewhere. So glad to be a part of the community. And oh, thank you, Meredith. Very kind of you. All right, so let's, can we see the poll results? That would be wonderful. Many thanks. Okay. So we've got a fair, decent number of folks in government, smaller and higher education, private industry, and then nonprofits. Much appreciated, folks. And then we've got a more of an even split between primary, secondary, community, technical, tribal colleges, and universities, with roughly a fourth of folks interested in all those, maybe a slight more for universities. So much appreciated. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you, Kevin and Meredith, for running that poll. That gave me a better idea of how to meet your needs today. But let's think about why to do this and how to do this. First of all, we should start with some sort of baseline about why should we care about educating the next generation of spatial thinkers? Well, first of all, I would just submit that all 21st century problems, health, equity, population change, natural hazards, water, energy, they're all spatial, right, in nature, from local to global scale. They are complex problems that increasingly affect our everyday lives, right? And they're all spatial in nature. So we should care about how do we educate the next generation so that they can tackle and understand our world, and in so doing, take action to make a better world, make a more resilient, more equitable, more sustainable world, right? That is the goal of using geospatial technology. Yes, we love the technology, right, folks? There's no denying that. Ooh, did you see this, the 3D voxel tool, right? We love the tools. But more importantly, there's a higher, more noble goal, right? And that is to understand the world. Oftentimes people give me their URLs and say, hey, Joseph, I've got my data on the map. And I'll say, that's great. And Why do I say and? Because the goal is to understand our world in a richer, deeper way and to take action to make it better, to make it more healthy and all the other attributes that we talked about before, to help people thrive. That is the goal of using geotechnology. So all spatial, all 21st century problems are spatial. And also, I just submit this to you to chew on today. I know it's kind of some deep thoughts for a Thursday, but we've got a lot of empowerment, don't we? With data as services, web GIS tools, field tools that we can easily deploy and collect data in, map and analyze and tell stories with story maps, dashboards, infographics, lots of tools at our disposal, spatial analytics, some of which are in the cloud, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. But we've been empowered, but we've at no time in history have we also felt so challenged, right? With not just with COVID, but natural hazards and other, look at the UN SDGs, right? We've got some challenges, the Sustainable Development Goals on our planet that, again, are local in scale and also global in scale. Secondly, I just submit this to you all, and that is each GIS professional, you all, the bulk of you here on this call are GIS professionals, you have an education connection. You've got kids, you know people with kids, you've got an alma mater, you know the school down the street from your house, some teachers there. You have a desire to connect with those educational institutions. And that's what we're here today to do, is to empower you with some ideas and hopefully some nuggets that you can take away in terms of how to exactly to do that. But right now we're anchored in the why to do that. And I'm also asking you to put on your educator hat with these why tenets, because when you go into a informal or a formal educational setting, I want you to think about these as sort of your leading points. Make them your own story. Don't make them Joseph's story, right? So craft them to your own, but maybe there's some elements here that you can actually use going forward with, hey, we've got some problems in our world. We want to help people understand the world. We want to empower students, rather than going in there saying, hey, there's a 3D capability in ArcGIS 3D scene viewer. More about that later, but that's not the approach. Is to get these big picture goals in the forefront. And then also I just ask you, well, what do you want to see in society? We all want to see a more resilient, equitable, sustainable world. And education is going to continue. It's under massive amounts of disruption, which affects our conversation today. So knowing that, some of you know that all societal structures are really undergoing massive amounts of change right now. Education, no denying that we're already reinventing and trying to figure out how to be vibrant and viable on through the 2020s, even before COVID happened. But of course, now that it's sort of exacerbated the problem that they're dealing with, and trying to be viable and vibrant. So geotechnology is going to continue. Education is going to continue in different forms, as well as geotechnology. It's going to continue as a relevant set of tools, data, and methodologies. We're never going to get to the point where we understand the world completely, right? It's a complex world, and 7.5 billion people shaping our world, right? So it's a dynamic, complex planet, and GIS is a complex set of tools to help us understand and make that world better. So all of these structures are going to continue. GIS is going to continue. Education is going to continue in varied forms, hybrid, online, face-to-face. And GIS professionals, you all in government, nonprofit, industry, and academia, you have a key role in this decade. You really do. More about that in a bit. But first of all, you are building the national spatial data infrastructure, not just the data, but the partnerships, the metadata. You're building the community, and I salute you all. You are, I think, the heroes of our age. You are actually, there's a lot of people that want to change the world. There are a lot of people that talk about changing the world. You folks are actually changing the world. You're making the world a better place. And I'm just proud to be a part of the community. And I just want you to, to lift yourself up a bit and say, yes, I am. I may be working on water lines for my community, or building, like Kevin, building a hazards resilience set of models. So you may be in the trenches doing that, but more broadly, you're building this better world, and you're solving these 21st century issues. You're revolutionary people, and again, I salute you. I've got a book about that exact topic called "Interpreting Our World." It's the 100 Discoveries That Revolutionized Geography. If you're interested, here's a QR code for it. But the point is, geospatial is helping people see the world in a new way, a different way. A more holistic way, right? The lithosphere is connected to the hydrosphere, is connected to the atmosphere, is connected to the anthroposphere, etc. right? Connected to the biosphere. The holistic view is so important to understanding these problems. Interdisciplinary research. And I just also ask you, who's a leader here on this call? I submit that you all are leaders. You're leaders. You may not be completely 100% confident in every aspect of your job, but I don't think anybody is. More about that in a bit too. But changing the way we see the world, again, that's your job. What do we want the professional landscape to look like in 2030? And then what do we want education to look like? This topic today, I think, helps us get there. It helps us unite what we do in our professional lives with nurturing this next generation of the GIS professional community. And we also, an element of this, we want to anticipate workforce demands. So one of your tasks in going forward in education and connecting with the education community is helping them to see what you see as going to be relevant looking into the future. As you know, geospatial technology is undergoing massive amounts of change. It's an exciting time for geospatial technology, right? Years ago, we would dream about, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had data as services that we could just stream into our GIS projects? Wouldn't it be great if we could do projections on the fly? Wouldn't it be great if we could switch from 2D to 3D? All these things are part of our everyday experience now. Sure, there are still some clunky things about geospatial that we wish were better, and we're working together to make those tools better, to make the workflows better, to share the models in more richer, deeper ways, et cetera. But it's an exciting time for geospatial technology. But there is a challenge with many organizations come to me weekly and say, we don't have my own organization, ESRI. We've got open positions that we can't fill. Maybe your organization's the same way. You've got positions that you can't fill because there aren't enough people with those skills to fill those positions. So there's a crisis point, really, in many organizations that has already passed, that they're grappling with how do we accomplish our goals if we don't have the people that have been trained to do this. Not, that there's no on-the-job training, because of course there certainly is. But how should we approach this challenge, and how can you all lead the way? One recommendation is to make it personal, with a caveat that I'll talk about in a bit. What's your story? Think about your story when you go to an educational institution. So in my case, I've got these early geographic days in Western Colorado. I actually grew up in a motel that my folks owned. My mother was also a school teacher. Yeah, bless her heart. 5th grade, she loved the best. But you probably stayed in a motel in the past where you know that there's an apartment right behind the front desk, right behind the front office. That's the kind of place my folks owned. It's right here in Grand Junction, Colorado. So my early geographic days were meeting people from all over the world in this motel that would come stay there. And that was my early love for geography, finding out where they were from and where they were going. And I also spent a lot of time in my room in that motel making maps on big poster board. I know this is pretty geeky, but think about the unique things that you did as a kid that can become a part of your story. I've got docks in my maps. I've got harbors. I've even got this. Check this out. What are these numbers in the margins of my maps? Address ranges. Look, the 3500 North block, the 4200 North block, which is 7 blocks north of the 3500 North. What kid cares about address ranges? What kid knows about address ranges? Again, you've got a unique story that nobody else has that you can bring uniquely to your workplace, of course, but also to educational institutions. And the photos that I took when I was a young person were all urban and rural landscapes. I have very few people in my pictures. It's kind of bizarre. I would go to just that spot on the 4th floor of that office building. Hey, can I take a picture out of your window? I would go to that certain place on the canyon rim where I could take that certain angle at a certain time of day. So I was very interested in landscapes even right then. The other thing that I did when I was a kid is, and if you're less than 40 years old, I might have to explain why I did this, but more about that later perhaps. But I would listen to radio stations at night to see where I could pick up the AM signals. And so, wow, I could pick up XROK from Juarez, Mexico, pretty cool, all the way into Western Colorado. KFRC, all the way from San Francisco, in my little transistor radio in my bedroom there in Grand Junction. And one of the best ones the clearest one was KOMA, Oklahoma City, 1520 AM. So I'd have this mental map of where all these stations were, and I try to pick up farther and farther away. Now, more recently, as I mentioned, I've been very blessed to be in these 4 sectors of society, which really gives me my passion for working with all of you over these past years, and looking forward to further partnerships with you looking forward. Because I think you're like me, you're a lifelong learner. No matter how much we've learned in the past, we're always seeking partnerships, new learning opportunities. And so that's why I love working with all of you. So I'm looking forward to further work with you all. So as Meredith very kindly mentioned, I spend a lot of time in campuses, universities, community colleges, schools, not just here in the USA, but some of the richest, most valued experiences I've had have been teaching in the UAE and in Australia. Good on you, mates. She'll be right. Taiwan, etc. So it's truly an honor to be with you all. And I'm a firm believer in field experiences. So here I am, on the Red River of the North, on the Texas-Oklahoma border, standing at 34 North, 98 West. Anyway, the point is, I have a great love for the GIS community and look forward to further conversations with you all. But I raise all this not to bore you to tears with my own story, but think about your own story and why you're so passionate about this, and somehow get that story into why and how to work with educational institutions. Also, I would advise number 2 recommendation. Oh, I mentioned I was going to mention a caveat, and that is, don't just tell your own story. I've been to presentations in the past by very intelligent, well-meaning people, and their whole presentation is what they do on the job. That's interesting, but tell me why it's connected to what I care about. So I would advise you, sometimes I hear people saying, hey, I had someone in my class and they talked about their parcel work for 90 minutes. Okay, I know you're really passionate about your water lines and your parcels and the other things, cool things you're doing. But if you're 12 years old and you're in that class talking to that 12-year-old class, you got to anchor it into, why should they care about the water lines that you're working on? Okay, anchor it to, hey, if you turn on the faucet, where does that water come from? How do you know if it's safe? How do you know you're not going to die drinking it, et cetera? So it actually matters what you're doing in the broader scheme of things. So anchor it to their own experience is what I would advise. So don't just focus on your own day-to-day work, but think of the bigger picture and why it might matter to them. Also, another piece of advice is anchor your approach to these 5 forces that I submit bring us to a pivotal moment in geospatial technology and education and society. People are more aware of the issues that you and I care about now in greater society, right? Water, energy, climate, et cetera. They care about that. It was only our community for many years that talked about those things, but now you hear these conversations on stairwells, in airport shuttles and terminals, right? On trains, in everyday conversation. So that's good. There's a rising awareness. So take advantage of that rising awareness, saying, yeah, you've heard about this situation happening. Here's what I'm doing in geospatial technology. Here's how you might use it in the classroom to educate your students, teacher that you are, in natural hazards that's going on right now, or the drought issue out west and in other places around the world, et cetera. And also, people are enabled to use these tools as never before. They're using a digital map for finding their way across campus or to their grandmother's house or something like that. They're using a fitness app to record their walks and their runs and their cycle rides. So they're enabled to use at least some of these tools that you and I use. Geotechnologies evolving into the cloud is a huge leap forward for education. So you can go into a classroom at any level and say, look, here are some things that are on the web that you can actually use without installing any software. More about the specific tools in a bit, but ArcGIS Online, the Living Atlas web apps, other things. Citizen science, going out and collecting data on tree species like behind me, the junipers and pinions in Western Colorado behind me, or light poles, or storm drains, or et cetera, right? Collecting that data, analyzing that data, mapping it, telling a story about it. That is quite doable and possible at all levels of education, even down to primary. And then finally, storytelling. This is a story map. And maybe my colleagues can put in, I pasted it in earlier, the story map that what I'm presenting to you right now. So you can dig into some of the elements that I'm probably going to breeze by to respect your time today. But this is a story map. And there are almost 4 million story maps that have been created, many thanks, globally, of varying quality to be sure, but people embracing that whole idea of multimedia. And this is just ArcGIS story maps. There's other kinds of multimedia story mapping kinds of tools out there, but just to ArcGIS story maps alone, almost 4 million, showing that people are really embracing this whole notion of maps as storytelling tools and maps as analytical tools and not just reference documents. By that, I mean maps as scientific elements, not just where is North Carolina, where is Colorado, where is Tajikistan, etc. Also, I would advise the following. Anchor your approach to some of the trends that are happening in GIS technology. It doesn't have to be this list. It could be the list that you care about most. I like to bring up 3D because we live on a 3D planet. It makes sense that we've got 3D analytical tools now. We had 3D visualization for years. Now we got 3D analytics, showing some examples of that. The whole idea of interior space mapping in the BIM and CAD world versus GIS, the outside world, and having tools that's starting to blend those like ArcGIS Urban and City Engine, et cetera. Show some real-time data feeds from the Internet of Things, stream flow, earthquakes, wildfire perimeters, weather, traffic, and tying that to, hey, there's a sensor network, including the 7.5 billion strong people sensor network. More about that in a bit. Enterprise and Web GIS talk about and demonstrate in some examples that I'll show in a bit, some inquiry-driven questions that you can pose based on Web GIS, like the Wayback Imagery, like the World Water Balance app, and others. And finally, touching on artificial intelligence and machine learning. More about that perhaps if we have time as well. But I've got some examples here in this story map. For example, a video of one of our ESRI business partners, ArcGIS Solutions, and seeing what's underneath the ground with an app and the data from utility network, fiber optic cable, water, sewer, etc. Seeing what's underground with this. Fascinating to be able to do that. And also anchoring GIS in, hey, there's broader IT things that you are teaching in your school, computer science and other things. Looking at data science programs emerging in universities, for example. Also, I would recommend demonstrating that we're in this sort of what I call phase 2 of GIS, which is really exemplified in, let me just pull up this tab, in the following. Traffic accidents, again, anchoring into what do students care about? Hey, traffic accidents they affect our everyday lives, they affect families, they're a serious issue in many parts of the world, including our own communities. And so in the past, the phase 1 is sort of, we could make maps like this, right? Showing crash data, accident data for example, a county in coastal Florida. But now what we can do is we can create these hex bins, and then we can extrude those, and then we can look at, through spatial statistics, hey, if I only have a certain time, budget, and staff, I can focus on the areas of consistent, significant difference, and thereby reduce fatalities and injuries with this kind of analysis. So in the past, again, we're mapping what we used to map in the paper analog world. We're doing it in a digital way. And that was good. That was an advancement. For its time, it was remarkable. But now we're seeing things in new ways. We can do things that we could never do with the paper maps or the digital versions of those paper maps. So that's what I call the sort of phase 2 of GIS, which might be another thing that you could consider. Also, and this may be the most important one of all, but listen. I know I'm doing a lot of talking here, folks, but I would highly advise listen to educators and speak their language. And again, coming back to that, do you have a 30-second elevator speech? I've got some on my Our Earth video channel if you want to look at some of mine, but make them your own story. Mine might provide some ideas, but one of the things that educators keenly care about is anchored to the content standards in science, social studies, math, etc., especially at the K-12 level. More about that in a bit, but really listen to what are their needs. If you and I go blazing into, let's say, a primary or a secondary school or a tech college or a vocational, a vo-tech or a community college, even a university, saying GIS is the best thing ever and you need to be using it in your curriculum, that's going to maybe interest about 5% of the people because they love geography or they're map geeks or something like that for some reason. But most of the people are saying, that's great, that's for you, I'm too busy, I have enough to do, thank you very much, I have a full curriculum, I have a full, other things I'm dealing with in my educational world. But if you find out, what are you teaching right now this semester, and then find out if there's anything that's the whys of where, supply chain management, economics, mathematics, there's lots of spatial connections in mathematics, biomes, energy, water, population change, and say, okay, you're not stuck, for example, to this map that's on page 300 of your textbook. Nothing against textbooks, but you've got the living atlas of the world where you've got ocean currents and biomes and interactive content. So even that alone, and other things that we could talk about, but find out what they're doing that maybe is not as engaging as they'd like it to be, not as inquiry-driven, problem-based learning as they'd like it to be, because every educator wants their students to be engaged. They want them to be learning and care. They want them to care. And so if you go in there saying, well, GIS, okay, don't do that. Say, I'm here to help you enable some of these whys of where elements in your curriculum and make them, again, more vibrant, more engaging, problem-based learning, connected to workforce development, especially at the community college level and some secondary schools. And also, as I mentioned before, focus on what's important. Don't stop at, look, my data's on the map. End of story. No, that's the beginning of the story. Geotechnologies is an enabling sort of thing that helps us to understand the world in a better, deeper, more rich way. And don't just focus on the tools. The tools change. And here's my example of a doorstop in an actual high school that I took where I was running a geotech club after school, which is another way of doing this, a geotech club. More about that in a minute. But the point I'm making here, probably many of you know this is an old Mac, right? It's now a doorstop. But at one point, it was someone's valued piece of their computer architecture, right? And it was pretty expensive, those old Macs. So the tools change, GIS changes. Don't focus just on the tools. It's what you can do with the tools. Also, I would like to focus on when you're empowering, enabling students and educators to use geotechnologies, you're actually focused on three things at once. It's not just the skills, and with the skills leg of the stool, it's not just the GIS skills, not just geocoding and buffering and things like that, for map projections. It's how to communicate, how to represent data, how to be critical of data. So those skills, but also content knowledge, right? You're teaching and learning with GIS. You always are anchored in a content area, right? You're looking at hurricanes, you're looking at water, population change, biomes, supply chain, and so on. So you're always, and that's another good message for educators, is that they're still teaching their solid content, but they're incorporating the skills. And then there's the geographic perspective. And also I would advise to mention that it's not just for geography. The geographic perspective runs through, of course, right, no surprise to you all in this community, it runs through all disciplines, from architecture to zoology, right, and everything in between. It's the geographic perspective that we need to, again, solve these perplexing problems in our world. So keep that stool of geoliteracy in mind. Also, as I hinted at before, and probably that's what drew many of you into being interested in working with educators, focus on career opportunities. There is an element of the following in education. Well, when are we ever going to learn? When are we ever going to use this after we graduate, right? You probably said that to yourself when you were a young person, or your teacher. And the message here is that you actually will use this in the future, right? We all know that, but oftentimes educators and their students don't know that you're actually going to use this. So that's one of the things that I've found working with these students over the years at all ages. They really kind of rise to the occasion. They're using a professional tool, GIS. I'm going to act professionally here, and I'm only 13 years old, and I'm going to act professionally, or I'm 20 years old and in a community college. Well, I'm going to rise to the occasion, and this is a professional tool, and I'm actually going to use this in health or business or wherever I'm going to work in the future. So focus on those career opportunities. Don't just focus on that and nothing else, but it's one of the elements that you should keep in the forefront. And also, as I mentioned, there's a story map here. You can look at some of the data I've got from like the World Economic Forum and other data sources about what's going to happen in the future in the workplace. Lifelong learners, I think, is the main thing that I'd like to focus on here. And that is the beauty, the wonder of geospatial, right? We all need each other, and we're all moving forward. And we're never going to get to the point where, yeah, we've got all that. Yeah, geotechnology, sure, we've mastered that. No, we need each other, and we're moving forward. And with educators, it's you're here for them, right? You're going to be a partner to them. It's not just here's a bunch of software and here's a bunch of lessons, which we'll talk about, and live long and prosper, right? Go forth. It is I am here for you're their geo mentor. You're going to be here for them for the long term. And so share in a balanced way what you do with GIS, as I mentioned earlier, and then share a little bit about your own research. Mine is all focused on teaching and learning with GIS. So it's, again, a great honor to talk with you about this. So for example, I would show ever so briefly that yes, I do publish, but I also create blogs and story maps to get the word out to a wider community. But I'm anchored in that sort of academic world. And here's one of my recent articles about, what I care about, what I'm interested in researching. So I encourage you to do that too. Employ strategies that reflect the changing nature of GIS. So there's a lot to chew on here. And since we've got a limited amount of time, I'm just going to highlight a few things. One of which is my colleague David DiBiase wrote an essay with a kind of a provocative title entitled "Stop Teaching GIS." His point, though, in that title was not that GIS doesn't matter, but oftentimes we approach teaching GIS is, okay, we've got to teach them how to buffer and how to geocode and how to do a map projection. And, there are ways to do that in the context of solving a problem. Okay, I've got a lesson on, I don't know, shipping routes in the Arctic with melting ice. I care about map projections, right? I'm not going to use Web Mercator up there. So why? Let's measure distances and angles and things like that and show why that matters. So solving problems with GIS, helping students learn how to learn, and so on. Some other things. The traditional tutorial style still has its place, and I have a whole bunch of lessons, for example, on the Spatial Reserves data blog, Spatial Reserves, that actually guide you through how to solve a problem with a public domain data set. On tea cultivation, I've got one on natural hazards, one on citing a business, etc. So that approach still is valid. And think about the first time you had to register data into the same map projection. You actually had to go through a tutorial with a step-by-step. And in my case, I had to go through it several times before I really understood, okay, this is how to do it in Pro now, for example. And so those elements still have their place, but nudging instructors into maybe instructors might ask you, do you have a lesson on Hannibal crossing the Alps? No, I don't, actually. And you don't need a lesson for every single thing that the instructors teach. The idea is you're teaching, it's the whole analogy of giving them a fish versus teaching them to fish. You're giving them the tools. And I submit that and I've got an essay on this, if they get at least comfortable, for example, in ArcGIS Online with about 10 different skills, adding data, creating it, looking at the table of data, symbolizing, classifying, creating a web mapping application from it. I mean, there's about 10 things. If they get sort of comfortable with just about 10 things, they can soar. They have superpowers, and so can their students. So there's really not hundreds of things to grasp. To be sure, if they want to dig deeper, there's ways to dig deeper. But the kind of core basics are pretty small. But the focus should be on, I want to teach about, especially at the K-12 level, about the Dust Bowl, or about historical hurricanes in the East Coast of the United States, or about world mineral extraction, or again, other topics. And I want to use GIS to teach those topics. Whereas in other places, some high schools, but mostly at the community, technical, tribal college level and the university, there is more of a focus on, I'm teaching GIS, and I'm using these tools and these data sets to teach GI science. But even that is changing, and there are more and more professors that I'm working with, and my colleagues are working with in business and data science, and they want to use GIS as a teaching tool to teach macroeconomics, or history of the 19th century Europe, or sociology and behavior, and so on. So there's a mixture in all levels of education. Also, my colleagues at the Carolina URISA, and I chatted about this before the webinar started. In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. A little musical interlude for you. But we talked about this a little bit. There's a champion oftentimes at a university. Sometimes it's the university librarian, the geospatial librarian. Sometimes it's a professor or a dean or somebody that gets really excited about geospatial and sort of spreads it around campus. You, in the GIS professional community, can help by tapping into that person, or persons it may be, and encouraging them, supporting them, showing them that you're there as a resource. In a school, it's usually an individual teacher that meets us at a science conference or a webinar, not just us, but it meets one of you, and they get really excited about this, and they're sort of the champion of GIS at their school. So if there's not a champion, find out, this again comes over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but listening is the key. Find out what their needs are and show them that you're not there pushing some just niche little tool, because educators at all levels get a barrage of emails on a daily basis saying, hey, this technology is cool, you should use it in the classroom. Hey, this technology is cool, you should use it in the classroom. And why should we use geotechnologies? So again, coming back to these things, geotechnologies is not going away. It's not just some fad thing that is here today and gone tomorrow. It is a fundamental tool to help us understand our world. So find that champion, nurture that champion. Also, showcase student work. It's all fine for you and I to show the web maps and apps that we've created and the results of our spatial analysis. That's good, and I don't want you to neglect that. But I also just encourage you to show some student work. I've got a project written up in this link here where these educators and their students and a couple of mentors, myself and about 3 or 4 colleagues, through Duville University in Western New York, GIS and the Data Citizens Project. We mapped storm drains. We created a survey. They went out and mapped those things. They talked about what are storm drains, how are they important to flood mitigation and water quality. And it's one of those things where storm drains, you don't even really think about that. Some of you do, but most students, this was a secondary school, a group of secondary school teachers and their students. That's not really something I really thought about before on the landscape. I'd see them every day on the way to school, but now they really do think about it, and they understand the connection between the natural world and the human built world, and why this particular issue matters. So that was a write-up that you might want to look at. Look at some story maps or web maps that students have created at all levels. We've got an annual competition. We've actually got several story maps competitions, and the results are, one way of one library of resources to show. I love this UAV story map from a student in Tennessee, mapped the campus with drone imagery and for an upcoming community event, saying, okay, here's where the food stands are going to be located. Here's where the craft fairs are going to be located on campus. It's just fascinating. I really like this one from a student in Canada. The point is, that student not just said, hey, here's the situation with the right whales dying, but at the end, she has and this is like a 12-year-old, this is a middle school student, why and how we can do something about it. So the whales were getting caught in lobster traps. And so came up with a solution. So the idea was, I like the highlight in here, is not just analyzing the problem, but coming up with a possible solution. That was really powerful. And I've got a Geo Inspirations column in Directions Magazine that you could pull from, stories, including this teacher here in Texas that is one of those teachers that just lets the students fly, lets them use animation software because a lot of them want to be filmmakers, lets them use GIS. There's a coding class taught by a young female coding instructor, so good role models for the young women in that school. Anyway, there are other stories in that Geo Inspirations column that you might want to look at. Here's my tiny little secret. It's so tiny, I have to have it in tiny font in my caving picture in New Mexico. But the tiny little secret is that you and I know this, but maybe articulate it to these educators that you're working with. GIS is too valuable for just 1 or 2 departments on a university campus or a college. It's too valuable just to be in geography in a high school. It needs to be in multiple departments. It really does, for the good of us all. Okay, the landscape of K-12 education. Let's talk about K-12 just for a moment. Anchor, I mentioned this earlier, I think many of you know this, to the state and national content standards. Many educators are not permitted to do anything that it's not connected, demonstrably connected to the standards. So you go in there and say, hey, GIS is wonderful, and here's why. Okay, show me how it's connected to the standards. And that's not actually a hard thing to do, because the standards are all about problem-based learning and learning about specific content areas, population change, river systems, forests, land use, so you can anchor it. And there are some guidelines, there are some elements that my teammates and I have created to help you in this regard too, but anchor it to the standards for sure. There is still slow but steady progress in the use of GIS in primary and secondary education, not just in the USA, but around the world. Mostly it's used as an instructional tool. There are about 10% of the high schools especially have a GIS course, but mostly it's in a content area like biology or math or geography or computer science. And this is a map that is a little geeky, but it's kind of fun because it's got a little red schoolhouse for all of the K-12 schools that have an ArcGIS Online license. And you probably will say, and rightly so, hey, Joseph, what are they doing with it? It varies, right? Some of them have the ArcGIS Online organizational account and they're doing a little bit with it, maybe 1 or 2 lessons per semester. Some of them do something daily, and there's a bunch of schools, as you would expect, in between. So the point is, this is one way that you could actually start. Hey, does that school down the street from my house or the school my kid goes to have an ArcGIS Online account? So that's one starting point. If they don't, it's one of those things you can say, hey, you can get all these tools for free. And it's not just the tools. And now here's some lessons, here's some curriculum, here's me as a mentor helping you, listening to you, etc. In higher education, most GIS is still within GI science, GIS, geography, and environmental programs, but that too is changing. There's an increasing diffusion, particularly in business and health. Now, I think many people wondered before 2020, hey, why does Esri have a health team? I don't think they wonder about it anymore, right? The connection between health and GIS and geography has never been clearer than in the last 3 years, right, folks? So these other disciplines, as you can see here in number 3, are small but growing. And I've got a video on more of that. And then final recommendations, and I want to, leave a little time for us to have a chat, but real world examples. As you folks know, as this passionate community knows, there is no shortage of tying it to what's happening now, this week, last week, right? Right now, obviously, you could, if you were in a school, you would talk about natural hazards. But there's a wide variety of other things you could chat about as well. So there is this whole idea of, and we've got some videos and some write-ups on this, geo news. Some teachers, every Monday, geo news. Let's use GIS to explore what's happening with this political instability, this health issue, this natural hazard, whatever else is going on. So it's a nice way of bringing relevance to the teaching with GIS. And that goes for university level too. It's not just K-12. I have a whole variety of things that make it fun. I think they're fun. Hopefully you'll find some nuggets in there that you think. I've got a 400 element crossword puzzle. That took me hours to create, but it's a blast. And that's another fun way of you introducing this. There's quizzes like where in the world is this? And you're using satellite imagery, 2D and 3D maps. I've got some, but you could create your own as well. Oftentimes people want to start with their own neighborhood. Okay, what's my school look like from a satellite image? What's my house look like? What is the median age? What is median age? Maybe they haven't had any stats yet. Okay, let's talk about that. What's the median age of this classroom? Do a little math. Okay, now let's look at the median age of the neighborhoods around here. Why is it so low right here on the college campus, for example, compared to other places in the community? Survey 123 is a great tool of, hey, let's go out and collect some data on the school grounds. If you can't get out in the field, school grounds is just fine, or the university campus. Collect it, map it, analyze it, and then tell the story about the ADA facilities or the recycle bins or the species of trees or the invasive species on campus or the amount of pedestrians at each intersection or places you feel safe on campus. There's so many things that you can actually use and map and analyze. And then again, go beyond the software, pose questions as you're conducting a workshop, for example, with students or faculty. Pose questions while you're teaching it. I talked about this, that advocate for a geospatial librarian, and sometimes an after-school club at the K-12 level is the best starting point. It takes time, admittedly, and resources. Your time is precious, I know, and very scarce, but sometimes that's the best way of kind of making an inroad, because you get those students that really, and I would pitch it this way. Do you like to get outside? Do you like technology? Do you want to make a positive difference in the world? Those kinds of questions, rather than, do you want to use geotechnology? Because very few students will say, oh yeah, I love maps, I love geotechnology. I mean, maybe some of this community was already drawn to that, but start with something else that's a bigger, broader thing that would appeal to more students. And don't overstress about using the latest and greatest version of software, whatever. The point is to be engaging and use tools that are relevant. There's no shortage of hands-on examples. I mentioned the Living Atlas apps. The Geo Inquiries are a whole series of lessons that my team and I have created on historical battles, hazards, population change, et cetera, ocean currents, sustainable development, and so on. There's other strategies if you want to click on some of those links there. There's ways to do this: after school club, a course, give guest workshops, be a geo mentor. I've got an essay on this that you can click on. Geo-mentoring is exciting. It involves a lot of different skills that you all bring. You don't all have the same skills, and that's good. And they need to hear from you with different skills and backgrounds. You can, as a geo-mentor, do these things. You can assemble data, maps, apps for that professor or that teacher that they don't have time to do. You can be their sort of the data curator. Okay, here's the data set, here's the map, and now you go build a lesson on it. You could give a presentation or a workshop. You can guide an educator with just advising and listening. You can sponsor an educator. Now, 2 weeks ago when I was in Florida, one of the secondary educators said she could not go to the ESRI Ed Summit had it not been for her geo-mentor. And I said, well, what do you mean? My geo-mentor, Joseph, actually offsets my cost to go to the Ed Summit in San Diego. That's, to me, is going above and beyond. That's pretty cool to hear about, that the geo-mentor made a financial commitment to that teacher. So I just want to encourage you, don't just think about the time. Maybe it's a financial support as well. Just wanted to lay that out there. I was very impressed. That really touched my heart. Do you have time for all this? You're a busy GIS professional. I respect you all, that you're even interested in this topic. What's the return on investment, you're wondering? Well, I just ask you to think about this. What are the consequences of not doing this? At least a tiny bit of this. The consequences are you don't have the employees for your organization in the future because not as many people know about this as that should know about this. And society will not benefit in the way that it should be benefiting because people aren't using the geographic approach to make wiser decisions, right? So there's lots of consequences for you not doing this. Look, our team, this Esri education team that I'm on, has about 15 people. There are thousands of schools. There are 110,000 K-12 schools in the USA alone, folks. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of colleges. There's a lot of uncharted ground, a lot of stones that have yet to be turned over, if you know what I mean. So we need you involved in this. Are you the right person to get involved? You might be thinking, well, Joseph, I'm not a GIS expert. Well, I would just submit to you all that none of us feel 100% adequate on the job. I was reading a book, for example, not too long ago, where the author said, I feel like I'm just playing at this profession. I'm not really there yet. Guess who that author was? It was the M through Z lyrics book from Paul McCartney. And Paul, in his last statements in the pages, are saying, I don't really feel like I've arrived as a songwriter yet. This is Paul McCartney. So if Paul doesn't feel completely confident and adequate, it's okay if you don't. Do it anyway. So I love this Bernstein quote. Hey, we're all limited on time. Accomplish great things. You need a plan and oops, not enough time. That puts pressure on you to actually get things done. And then finally, focus on these skills when you're outreaching to schools, libraries, museums, and higher education. Be curious, ask questions about the world. Be able to work with data. I mentioned the Spatial Reserves data blog earlier. Be critical of that data. Show examples of bad maps. Sometimes it gets teachers and students' attention. There's a lot of maps that are indecipherable because everybody is a map maker now. Everybody has access to these mapping tools. Number 3, know your geographic foundations, your geotechnical foundations. And part of that is, who can I mentor? Well, we're talking about that today, but I also encourage you as the community to think about this one. I don't think we're as good at this one as we are with who can I mentor. We're very giving. We're very much interested in helping the community and the world and people and the planet. But think about, who can I connect with to receive some mentorship? We all have gaps. Who can I outreach to in the community to help me in my journey? Don't be shy about doing that. I just encourage you to do that too. And also, this geospatial technology competency model helps you identify gaps in your own journey forward. I and a bunch of people work with the Geotech Center at community college level to come up with this GTCM. And I like the bottom part of the pyramid especially. Are you organized? Are you ethical? Can you deal with data? Those sort of personal competencies I think are very important to focus on. Be adaptable. Try to get to, outside your disciplinary comfort zone. Go to a track at a conference that is not your area of expertise and learn some new things, meet some new people, and also strive for this. I love this Ikigai, Japanese sort of Venn diagram. What are you good at? What can you be paid for? What do you love? What the world needs. Try to get to, do we meet the center every day in our jobs? No, but strive for the center. Yeah, thanks for the ERISA links, folks. And then finally, nurture good communications. Do you have that speech as to why? Just tell me why this matters in 30 seconds, in 1 minute, in 5 minutes. Hey, I've got a faculty meeting in an hour, and can you come to that virtually or face-to-face and talk about this in a way that actually resonates with the language that my colleagues and I are speaking. So again, folks, I really do believe that this decade is an exciting one for all of us in the geospatial community. And, again, think about the big goal, that wise decisions will be made with the spatial perspective and the use of geotechnologies for a healthier, happier, and more sustainable future. Questions, comments, issues?
Well, thank
Thanks,
you very
folks.
much. Thank you so much. If we were live, there would be an applause right now. One of the things that really resonated with me is how you said we can just teach the teachers. We don't have to teach the students. And for me, I feel more comfortable doing that. That's a really good idea. Yeah. So we have a couple questions here. You can drop more in the Q&A or in the chat. The first question is, what is it? Is the story map template that you were using to scroll down and you move around like your personal story? What's that called?
Well, with the new story maps tools, yeah, this one right here, it is just the default story maps where you're adding elements into the story map. The classic story maps have a template that you have to follow at the beginning, and you have to choose cascade or shortlist, but this is the new story maps format. And so that's just what I'm using here. I wanted to keep it pretty simple and not too complicated. So there's no sidecar elements in here. Well, actually there was this part here that when I was doing my own personal story, that's a sidecar. That's a sidecar element there. So I like doing that because it kind of, anchored you in the, in the different places around the planet that I had as little elements on the map. So, but the rest of it is just, it's just a straight news story map. But the nice thing is that if you created something like that and use that in a school, it's not the only way that you can approach this, but then you can go to any computer, right? And it's if you shared it with the public, you can pull it up anywhere. You don't have to have your own device that you're bringing to the college or the school. You could just use that. And ditto for all those resources I talked about, the Wayback imagery, the Living Atlas Water Balance app, the Cool Maps migration map, and other things. Thanks.
Excellent.
And by the way, I do have here it is. I wrote this for the Young Professionals Network. So I'm going to put this in the chat box as well. How can young professionals connect with the education community? But you could be a mid-career professional is the point I'm making here. I wrote this for the YPN blog yesterday, but it applies to all of us. And there's really in text form, most of the things that I mentioned in the story map. So it's a little drier. It's not as lively as the story maps format, but if you need something, that you could print and hand out to somebody, you're welcome to do that too.
Okay, we just got this other question here. Is Drone to Map available for free to K through 12 organizations?
Yes, it is. Awesome.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, they get a really good package. They get
Good
a lot of
deal.
tools. They get community business analyst web, ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro if they want it. They get a lot. Again, it's not about the tools, but most of them find ArcGIS Online and the apps and the Survey 123 and the associated web tools just fine, just adequate enough for their needs. In fact, more than enough. So most of them stick with that. And the nice thing too is they can use any device. They don't have to install any software and work with their IT staff. But for a few, they want to go the extra distance. And so yeah, Drone to Map is there, ArcGIS Pro, and so on. And then, on a related note, for those of you that are reaching out to your community colleges, technical colleges, tribal colleges, universities, chances are they already have some ESRI tech. And I guess, again, I don't want to tie it to the tools, but if you're wondering, well, what can I use when I go there? They probably already have all this stuff at their fingertips. Most of them, well, many times they don't realize that they have it, because it's someone over in another department that's using it, or somewhere across campus. And they're very fragmented oftentimes, and they're not, they're busy, and so they're not saying, "Hey, I'm in the business school. I didn't realize we had this stuff." So that's one of the reasons why we need you all to spread the word.
So we have another question here. Do you have strategic spreadsheet or plan that industry partners or higher education can follow to do this? Like a path for state association?
No, but maybe that's something we could chat about. I'm very active in the state association, so appreciate the Carolina folks having me on. Our goal is really the deeper implementation of GIS. So GIS is a whole platform, not just teaching software X version Y, but the field tools, the coding, the web apps, the analysis, the mapping. Thinking of GIS as a whole platform. So that's the deeper part. And the other part of our mission, again, sharing with you all, is the broader implementation of GIS. So the deeper and the broader implying not just in geo-enviro GIS. Again, I'm a geographer. I love working with those departments. But if we really want to make a change in education, it has to be in business, in engineering, in data science. Think of the business schools alone. I'm working with Arizona State. They have 6,000 students in their business school, in the W.P. Carey School of Business. That's huge, right? If even 10% of those students were empowered with some sort of location analytics, that's a sea change. So again, I'm not just thinking about the numbers, but there's some low-hanging fruit with business and these emerging data science programs, for example, and civil engineering and a bit of health, medical, health informatics. And that's another thing. Maybe sometimes the phrasing is important. So in business, it's usually location analytics is with a term that resonates, not geographic information systems per se. So part of it is the language that you use as well, but I don't want to get too hung up on that. But again, it's all about listening.
I have another question here. Well, I have one person that asked who I am. I think I was so excited to have you here that I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Kevin Haynes, and I am the environmental GIS manager for the state of South Carolina's National Guard. I have another question here from Robert. He's been to the website that I posted, the K through 12 education software at Esri's website, and he's looking for how to request drone to map. Who should he reach out to?
So it is the person that has signed up for the ArcGIS Online account for that school. They are the main point of contact in that school, and they have to request it. In other words, you and I, as GIS professionals, can't say, "Hey, I want drone to map for this school." That person in the school has to do that because it's one point of contact in the school. You can certainly show them how to use it and how to empower the students in doing that kind of thing. But it is good question.
He added on here that he already has the K through 12 bundle. So does he already have drone to map?
So if you're the person at the school, whoever that is commenting, you're the person that's empowered. And what you need to do is just go to our just email me if it's hard to find on the K-12 page, and you don't already have it, you have to request it. That's all. Yep, but great. Very cool.
Well,
and there is in the North Carolina GIS community, I did a couple of sessions, just if there's anybody on from that community, with the CTE, Career Technology Education community in North Carolina. They're very active, and they're very keen on remote sensing and UAV work. So that's another, kind of find out where the interest is, and go with that. And so in that case, my sort of inroad in with that community is the CTE North Carolina community, because they were already keen on remote sensing and drones. Awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah, this has been fantastic. We have had about 50 people show up, and they also stayed for the whole time. So that was excellent. We're just thrilled that you came and spoke to us today. Yeah, we really enjoyed it.
I did as well. And thanks for having me. Again, looking forward to chatting with all of you in the future.
And we will post this on our YouTube page. And we will also be posting some of these resources that we've been talking about on our Twitter page. You can find Carolina ERISA on Twitter. And hopefully we'll continue to have this conversation. We're looking at other webinars in the future. We're looking at doing this once a month, having different topics, and we've kind of been focusing on education for a while, but I was talking to Edie Punt at Esri, and we're talking about doing some cartography stuff as well in the future. So keep looking forward to for the stuff that we're doing, and have a wonderful day. If you're in the Carolinas, stay safe. If you're in Florida, stay safe, and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
everyone.
Meredith. Thanks, Kevin. You all take care. Yep, be careful out there.